finish off part one with a little session on local to global. So I'd like to introduce, I'd like to introduce actually, Divya McMillin is going to be hosting this session for us. So Divya, I'm not sure whether you can hear us.
I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Good. What's it? Good afternoon? Still afternoon.
Good morning.
Morning, of course it is. It's been a long day for us.
Yes. Well, I am just thrilled to be here. Thank you, Simon, for inviting me to host this brief but really exciting and really fun panel with Simon and Tim Strege from Tacoma. I am Divya McMillin, Associate Vice Chancellor at the University of Washington, Tacoma, but most exciting, I run this Global Innovation and Design Lab, where we are in this intimate business of understanding the need that drives success and the needs that get in the way of success. And so in this zone where we apply human-centered design to understand what is it that make startups really startup and startups kind of falter, that's what we do at the Global Innovation and Design Lab. And I'm just really so happy to be here. And if we had $1 or £1 for every time we heard "May the 4th be with you," we would have enough funding, I think, to sustain startups throughout the world. I want to very quickly turn this back to you, Simon, because we have several people joining us from different locations in the United States. And so if you could give us a little bit of a snapshot, how have things gone this today for you? I tried to get into a few sessions early this morning between my own meetings, but how has it gone over there in London? And if you could kind of refresh us all on the vision and goals of the Founders Festival as people are joining the call from the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. Well, today's been a really good day. I think it's been a really interesting day, and we've covered quite a lot. So we've covered right from the beginning. So I actually, well, even before I started the educational part, we had Mark Sapsford talk about networking. So a really good session of getting everybody to speak to each other, of getting everybody in the room to talk, to be able to understand how to connect, what sort of conversations to have. So the day was started with being sociable, with being connecting, with developing your network. So that was where we started. And then we moved on to really the other things that you should consider when starting a business. So I kicked off with really what makes a good business idea. And we explored that. We explored migraine level ideas, not just an idea that anybody could do or just is an idea that doesn't solve a really big problem. So we looked at that. We went further into a session on from Chris Fox on Everybody Lies. So once you found yourself a migraine problem, well, have you found it? Let's speak to people. So once we start speaking to people, Chris covered a session that people don't necessarily tell you the truth. And I don't mean intentionally lying to you. It's just people are kind and people will tell you you've got a great idea when you haven't. So it's all about that. So we moved on the idea part about how to question people. Then we moved into idea validation. So the technical, the science of actually finding out whether you have a migraine level idea. So the first part of today was all about the idea before moving on to, now you've established you've got a good idea, you've established customers, you've established it's a migraine level idea. What else needs to be put in place? So we looked at the legal side of it. And in particular, if you're going to raise investment, the legal side is very important. So we looked at that. Then we moved on to, towards the end of the day, into the business side of things, so the business operations. So we had an online thing. Michael from Germany, Winifred in the room, talking about the last session, if you caught this, all about putting the right financial structure in place, understanding your finances, understanding. Winifred looked at exciting things like dynamic equity. So we explored many different parts of that. But all about the pre-launch side of things. So that was really the day. And together with all of that, we had a pitch party, we had some online events. So lots of things happened today. And one other thing, just before we go over, I'm wondering if you could play the video. I just want to give you an idea of really for the American audience. So we've got a video to play. It's 1 minute, and this really sums up where we started the day. So full screen. Okay. I just gathered that the online audience couldn't hear the video.
I'm gonna put.
No, we won't play it again. We played it in ourselves.
I'm gonna put in the chat if they want.
Okay, we'll put it in the chat and you can listen to it. But that was just really a summary. I say a summary. It was where we started. Darth Vader. You know.
So yeah.
So Jay.
Divya, the question was, what had Darth Vader got wrong with his idea? Did it pass the bomb test? And did he pitch it to the right person in the bank? And I think we could say no, 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 and no.
Yeah,
that's what.
So that's just an idea, a feeling of the day. We had some cartoons, we had some pitch parties, and we had some sessions and lots of networking.
That's wonderful. And I wanted to ask you to enact the whole video. I mean, if we can't hear it, maybe you could. But so thanks so much for that quick recap. We are all excited here. The day is starting up in the Pacific Northwest, and of course, well underway in other parts of the United States. Tim, what can we expect? And for folks, just a brief word of introduction about Tim Strege, Executive Director of the William Factory Small Business Incubator. And what is most striking about his background is that the William Factory Incubator was the recipient of the Champion of Compassion Award by the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. And that always is striking to me, because what's failure without compassion, or how can failure turn to success without compassion? So Tim, really such a pleasure to have you here as well. And if you can kind of tell us a little bit about what are the goals for the US side of things, what's similar and different about the US context. And I know Simon has a lot to say about that as well. So please go ahead, Tim, and welcome.
Sure, thanks, Divya and Simon. So the US portion for the next 2 hours is going to cover the terrain of the United States. We're going to be opening up in Miami for a review of what's happening in the startup scene in the Southeast. And then we're going to move to the Midwestern United States in Fairview Heights and the St. Louis region, where we'll see what the dynamics are in the central continental United States. And then we move up to the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle-Tacoma area, and we'll share some insights from entrepreneurs and how we're attempting to assist them in this new economy. Now, there's a connection between the UK, the United States, and the rest of the globe. And that connection happened due to the pandemic. Obviously global in scale, but in the United States and around the world, it opened two different pathways for entrepreneurs. One pathway were entrepreneurs called necessity entrepreneurs. They got laid off. They found no other opportunities for employment as plants and storefronts were shut down. And so they started their enterprises with whatever skills they had for some earned income. The other pathway is what's called opportunity entrepreneurs. They also use their skills, but it wasn't necessarily out of necessity that they needed the income. They had a commercially viable idea that they wanted to impart to customers. And rather than rely on large supply trains and large manufacturers and large marketing companies, they found methods to do it themselves. And what the pandemic began to do is connect founders and mentors with other global oriented organizations and reach its tentacles across the world, where now the entrepreneur may be local, as Simon says, but they ought to think globally, because the resource of an entrepreneur, even if it's their initial customers are local, they've got the expertise of what we just discovered with Founders Festival on a global level. Your mentorships, your connections, co-founders, potential suppliers, those can assist in marketing your products and services to a much larger geographic area. So that's the basis of our program today.
Thank you, Tim. And moving along with that very theme, so we are talking about the innovations that have emerged in the pandemic. It's been a confounding space for folks with real experiences of struggle and strife across the globe. But we have just really witnessed ways in which connectivity and especially these technological affordances have made so much possible. Simon, would you reflect a little bit on what have been some of the ways in which innovation and support for startups has been accelerated through the pandemic?
Yes,
Because of this connectivity.
Divya, absolutely. The one thing, and I say the one thing, the thing that struck me immediately when lockdown happens was, and I say lockdown happened in the UK. I remember the day. It was 23rd of March 2020 when Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister at the time, announced lockdown, and it was, what now? We were going into a complete unknown, and previous to that, I was doing almost daily face-to-face meetings. I was coming into central London, having meetings with people. Suddenly, none of that was available. And I'd had the odd sort of, I wasn't even Zoom, I forget what I was probably using Skype at the time. But suddenly people starting to talk about Zoom, got onto these Zoom calls, and I'm making connections with a lot more people than I was on a day-to-day basis of coming into single meetings. And actually, I wasn't just making these connections, I wasn't spending the time traveling, so I could make more connections. But I also, there's a formality to face-to-face meetings in offices. Would you like a cup of tea or coffee? There's a whole, there's none of that. You can just into Zoom straight away. So I can see the person on the other side has got their bicycle behind them, and I know they're into cycling. There's connections happening. It was a different paradigm. So we looked at that, and myself and Jake, and we thought, well, how can we explore the mentoring network that we have and the founders that we help on a digital stage? So we got this platform, Founders and Mentors, and we started to put together our mentors into the network, and then founders. We weren't intending to form a global community. It was the local people that we knew. But of course, what happens in these digital communities is very, very soon people hear about it. So we started to get mentors from people like Michael from Germany. We started to get mentors from Switzerland, all over the place. And as that grew, and we started to get more and more people from the US. And actually, the US has probably been our fastest growing communities as it's over the last year. This wasn't intentional. This wasn't part of the plan, but we have globalized 12 Ronnies through having a platform during the pandemic that's changed the way we've operated. And as Tim said, we've been able to deliver expertise from different parts of the world into local environments. So Divya, that's sort of a snapshot of how we've been developing as an organization, as 12 Ronnies. And also I wanted to add one other thing. I'm in the process at the moment, although my main job is doing this and helping people do startups and mentoring and helping with idea validation. I'm an entrepreneur. I can't help myself. I'm starting a business, another business at the moment. And funny enough, it's in the States, starting out of Philadelphia. I've never met the people that are running it there. Well, I've met them on Zoom. So it's showing that it's not just talk, we're actually doing it.
Thank you, Simon. And you kind of remind us that really the pandemic was a time and a place where the innovator mindset, the startup mindset actually thrived. We're so used to designing against constraints. In the Global Innovation and Design Lab, with our framework of human-centered design, we were completely flummoxed with the pandemic. How do we do human-centered design without humans in the room? And it was pretty stunning to us that our volume of projects actually increased exponentially because so many more could access our services in ways that they could not have done before. So the global part of our name really proved concept at that point with the connectivity. Turning over here, Tim, if you can reflect on how do we sustain innovations? How do we sustain these connections? And Simon, you as well will have some insights for us if the connectivity sparks ideas and some sort of mentoring and so on, because it's immediate, it's quick. We kind of lose track of time and space, which can also be a little bit to a detriment for our work-life balance. But how do we sustain these relationships for the long run to actually scale up? Or is it uniquely tailored to a kind of a startup spark environment?
No, I think it affects us all, and through two ways. One is strategy, and two is networking. So strategy, because of what we've learned from institutions like the University of Washington Design Lab and organizations like Founders and Mentors, the strategy is shifting from competition brings out the best to collaboration brings out the best. I think there's going to be a tipping point soon that entrepreneurs and others in the commercial sector, social sector, educational sector discover, rather than this hallmark of competition, it's collaboration, it's teamwork, it's sharing of resources and ideas and the synergies that develop from that. That's the economy and the society of the future. Second is networking. Even if you're a small organization like the William Factory, very small, but we've learned that networking adds to our value that we transfer to early stage entrepreneurs. So if you go to williamfactory.com, I put it in the chat, you'll discover a video series link from local to global. 20 on-demand videos from people like Winifred Sorby that's got expertise in global finance, to accountants, to marketeers, and an amazing entrepreneur called Safira Sanders, who's operated in the global environment. All that you can learn in those 20 on-demand videos, and there's no charge. And in the future, we'll be adding to that value. The other on Founders and Mentors, 12 Ronnies, you can set up your own community. So we've set up the Pacific Northwest Gateway community. So people can join from Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, North America, and stay in touch with one another. The other is we're integrating many of our programs. So on June the 8th, we're bringing in John Brislin, one of the best experts in export, import, and finance, for a half-day workshop with the William Factory Incubator. And recently, by the way, and anyone else can petition, we have a US State Department placement on an economic empowerment program Nuno Renano, who is from East Timor, over by Indonesia, a relatively young country. His expertise is in coffee, but he's staying with the William factory to learn from ourselves in our region to go back to East Timor and form an incubator there to assist their early stage enterprises. So what's happening is by virtue of collaborative strategies and global networking, you've got a Pareto optimum. It's the best for all.
Thank you, Tim. Simon, a few comments or thoughts about sustaining
Well,
relationships.
even before we go to that, just you sparked me on a previous question about innovation and how things have sort of changed. And I think the pandemic has changed so much in terms of innovation, or the lockdown, the effect of the lockdown. I don't think there's been a time in human history where you've had billions of people, certainly hundreds of millions of people connected to the internet, that have been sent home, that have got a little bit more time on their hands, that are thinking about the future, that are thinking about what they can do, are thinking innovation-wise. They've got access to the world's information through the internet. And I think we're going to see an explosion of innovation. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is innovation is around the digitization of existing business models. But I think there's a lot more that's going to come from what people have been putting in place over the last 3 years through having sat down during the pandemic. So that's one point I wanted to make about the innovation side of things, but also the connectivity side of things is going to make the distribution of this innovation so much easier. Because a lot of it is digital. We're moving into a digital world. And for me, as for the that we saw early in the Founders Festival at the beginning, I was using ChatGPT to help us talk about good business ideas. Now these are innovations unheard of a few years ago that are now being part of general presentations. So I think there's a whole connectivity that's happening, a whole pandemic-driven innovation scene. So that's sort of my views on the early part. What was the other part you wanted me to?
Just your thoughts on sustaining that energy through this startup phase into success, while the technological environment that has emerged through the pandemic and accelerated connectivity is wonderful. What do we need for the stamina to endure for the long term?
Well, I think what we need, and Tim hit the nail right on the head, is to move to a much more collaborative world. It's where we've been and where people have put moats around their businesses and tried to protect them against competition. I think those days we're moving on from now. And I think this collaborative world is going to make innovation more sustainable. We're open sourcing a lot more software. We're making things more collaborative. And with the rise of artificial intelligence, I think it's going to be even more collaborative, even more data driven. We're going to have access to more markets. So I think the sustainability of all of this is actually already baked into the models of the future. We are going to be with the rise of social networks in the early days was a way of doing things, but I think now there's a lot easier ways to collaborate, and that's going to lead to much more sustainable innovation.
Thank you, Simon. In the 5 minutes that we have left, I want to ask you both a question that I would find really interesting to understand. What is it that is frustrating in this environment? We've had a kind of a very positive approach to innovation through the pandemic and emerging out of it. What is it that makes you want to tear your hair out? Or maybe, Simon, the ship's already sailed there, but what confounds you in this environment, and where do you see room for that next innovation?
I'm thinking, so over to Tim.
Yeah, it's conquering barriers. It's inclusion. It's involving more people into entrepreneurship. It's not exclusion, it's adding to the economy by allowing an open door to the commercial marketplace. And the United States in particular has shut that door or created barriers for entry for many, whether it be lower income, disadvantaged residents, people of color, people that don't have a lineage of being in the business, people that have limited financing. Opening up those doors will add value to the total economy. The other limiting factor, I think, has been our view of the past. We have to reimagine our communities of what they can be. There's a new term called placemaking. How can you make the place that you reside more important, both for local residents and more important to the globe? And I want to commend Divya for editing and actually writing a chapter in the book, Place, Power, and Media. And she talks about placemaking strategies, understanding your history, understanding your culture, understanding your language and other both opportunities and barriers from the past, how to bring those barriers down, open those entrances, and allow more people to participate in an entrepreneurial community. That's the solution.
Thank you, Tim, for that shout out. This is truly something that businesses and our economic environment ecosystem here in Tacoma is grappling with. Our minority women-owned businesses really need that space to grow, and we do need kind of a lowering of the structural constraints. And the biggest boards that we worked through during the pandemic, the Economic Development Board, the Tacoma Pierce County Chamber, they were grappling with actually reimagining their vision so that we have a more equitable and inclusive place in which to do business. And in fact, that is the Chamber's tagline now, after working through a sort of a design exercise with us to remove these constraints. And so things are just getting better. Of course, there are huge barriers that still get in the way. Simon, what are your thoughts on lowering these kind of structural barriers, even as we accelerate technologically and in our global connections?
Yeah, I mean, when Tim was talking, really what struck me the most, and I think it's a massive frustration, is and limitation to innovation, and particularly in a business sense, is inequality. And I think inequality, personally, I see it rising, and AI isn't helping either. So that, I mean, we're all sitting at a university here. We're privileged. We're also in privileged centers. We've got so much more chance of finding good ideas, of innovating with them, of finding the resources. But a lot of the world doesn't have this. There's a lot of inequality across the world and within communities. So that's a frustration of mine, but I see that as a growing problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I really wish we had more time, but we are right at 10:29 on the Pacific coast. And just want to wish you all well and enjoy your time at the pub. Wish we were right there to join you, but another time. And Simon and I have shared a coffee recently in London, so I was really appreciated that opportunity. And thank you, Tim, for your comments on this end. And we will close the session now. And thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you
Let's
very
stay
much.
connected.
So Tim,
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what we do is we close it from our hand, so some of you can become the host. I made co-host Elizabeth, Divya, Mario, and Tim. So some of you will have the host key, and you can run the rest of the evening. Sorry, the day. Okay. Sounds
okay,
good?
so bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Well done, everybody.